Hey, good evening, Kansas Bass Nation. Your old buddy Dan, joined by Clayton Rudman tonight. Clayton's our KBN Conservation Director, does an awesome job for us. Um, Clayton, we better do all the talking we can before Brad gets here.
All right.
And I'm not kidding about that at all. Um, Something a little different this evening. We're halftime or so of most uh, club schedules and circuit schedules, slowing down with the heat. Um, let's talk about something really positive, and I'm just going to give it to Clayton, and you just roll with it, brother.
All
Just
right.
just lay it out.
Well, we wanted to come on here tonight to announce that we were the recipients of a $4,000 grant from the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame and a $4,000 grant from AFCO. We've been selected for a habitat project. It'll take place at Perry Reservoir. We're going to build what they call an Arkansas cube. They are basically a floating cube designed to fill with native aquatic vegetation. And you basically take them to different parts of the lake and you put them in shallow water and you fill the cube full of your aquatic vegetation. And the theory behind it is all the wave action from the wind and boats and everything will sit there and it'll break up the habitat, the aquatic vegetation that's in there, and it will help propagate and seed an area. And hopefully, you can overcome all the forces in nature to actually get some native aquatic plants growing. In the lake. The plant we're going to try to grow is called coontail. I don't know the scientific term, but the reason that biologist has chose that is this is what Arkansas has done too, and they've had pretty good success with these.
Is that
Is
is that the correct thing?
that is the correct thing?
Okay.
So as you can see, it's a floating structure. Has chicken wire in there, obviously to keep birds and turtles and everything else from eating your aquatic vegetations in there. But we're going to try to get coontail established. Coontail is native to Kansas. A lot of you guys probably seen it in farm ponds, maybe seen it in the lake, but it doesn't actually have to root to the soil, like actually to the bottom of the lake. It can actually just free float in the lake. And so as our lakes fluctuate up and down, it'd be a good aquatic plant to be able to get started because we won't have to like water willow, cattails, all of that. They got to be in the water. So if the water drops tremendously, then you starve them out. Or if the lake floods, right, they can't move with the water level. Where this stuff can move up and down, uh, with the water level. So we'll be working with Nick Kramer with Wildlife and Parks. He's the Region Two Habitat Coordinator, and so I will be probably putting some stuff out. I think the goal is to hopefully maybe get some more of these built this year and get them in the lake, and then get some tanks so he can start propagating some coontail and keep them filled up. And then they're going to use this as a 3-year study um, to see how it works on our lakes here in Kansas. It's kind of like a pilot program. And if it's successful, then the goal is to duplicate this and move it around to more reservoirs in the state of Kansas. Obviously, grass, getting some kind of aquatic vegetation, that they a lot of the biologists tell you that that's a game changer on their lake, right? You get all the benefits. I mean, you can sink as many cedar trees as you want, but the benefits of aquatic grass for habitat and rearing and all that, you know, trump pretty much everything else. So, um, it's good to see that AFCO and Bass Fishing Hall of Fame, have liked our last, you know, work we've done. We've done 2 habitat projects now at Wilson where we've built the mossback habitat, we've sunk cedar trees, we've built pallet structures. We've done all that in the past, and so this one's a little bit different. Different part of the area. Um, so what Danny shows there is all the mossback stuff we built, and we completed that this spring. We got it all sunk in the lake. I think we were able to sink between 50 and 100 cedar trees, um, along with it. I talked to the biologists out there in their spring sampling. He said anything we put in the lake pretty much had fish on it. So they did
Oh,
good shocking around our habitat that we put out there. Obviously, we would have liked to put a lot more, but every little bit helps that we can get in the lake. So like I said, we wanted to get in on here tonight and let everybody know we were recipients for 2026. And moving forward, we'll continue to put in with this, and maybe put in for some other grant opportunities as they come up. So we have built some of these Arkansas cubes. They're currently out in Wilson Reservoir. We didn't get a grant for that. That is what the local biologist at the lake, wanted to spend his habitat dollars on this year. So he got it approved with his supervisor, and then we spent a day with volunteers from out west here, and with Wildlife and Parks, the Region One habitat coordinator and his seasonal help, and then Travis at Wilson, his seasonal help, and then four more of us from KBN, and we constructed like 31 or 32 of these cubes here about a month and a half ago, and they're sunk all over the lake out there. So if you drive by and see one floating, we just ask that you kind of let them be. You'll probably notice a lot of grass and stuff around them floating in the lake, and that's to be expected. That's the stuff breaking out of the cube, and hopefully is going to propagate an area and get a colony of this started. And if we can get colonies started, then they'll move these cubes around to other parts of the lake and just continue to you hopefully get aquatic vegetation started in the back of a lot of the coves. So it's good to see Wildlife and Parks trying some new stuff. Like I said, these originated in Arkansas. I think I posted earlier the podcast link that our Arkansas Wildlife and Parks put out there, how they actually it's the Army Corps of Engineers that kind of came up with the concept for them, and they kind of implemented it. But if you got and look, they're having really good success, and I think they have this going now in like 5 or 6 different reservoirs in Arkansas, and they've got been successful in getting a habitat reestablished in some of their lakes that have previously lost it. So a little bit about what's going on in conservation right now.
just a little bit.
Yep.
Oh goodness. Um, and not I'm not stealing your thunder at all. This is your program. Um, I'm guessing we'll need how many, half dozen or more
Yeah.
volunteers?
So there was 8 of us, and I talked to Travis. They spent one day cutting all the PVC before we got there. So they went and got the materials, got the PVC, got all the measurements, and then they cut it with a chop saw, and it took them a whole day to cut just the pieces of that. And then we came in the next day, and it took we didn't really break or anything. It took us about 7 hours for 8 people to build 30 of those. So if we're going to do all the cutting and all the building, it's going to be a full day's worth of work, and we're going to need as many. The more volunteers we got, the better, because as people are gluing them together, then other people can be attaching the chicken wire. And um, I don't know what size Nick's going to build. Obviously, Travis picked the size that he wanted, and Nick's going to talk to him, and I think they're going to talk to the guys from Arkansas. And Nick may build bigger ones. I don't know what his plan is there, but when I hear back from him and we receive the rest of the grant money, we'll probably start getting ready to start buying materials and getting them there, and finding a work day that works for everybody. And I'll be looking, and obviously we need as much adult and youth help as possible. Obviously these grants, they really want the youth to participate, in these in these programs. So
Yeah, that would
yep,
be really good. That'd
yep,
be really good idea. Get, of course, sidebar, Tate and crew are at Kentucky Lake at the
yep,
moment, getting ready for the Bass Youth Nationals this coming weekend, and then the high school is the following weekend.
yep,
They're actually all in.
yep.
Well, they're
Kentucky.
actually in Tennessee, but they're on
Yeah,
Kentucky Lake. They're for there for 2 weeks. So
yep,
darn it.
yep. And like I said, I don't have anything scheduled, at this point. Obviously, I've let Nick know, and like I said, we're waiting on the rest of the grant money to. We've got half of it, so we're waiting on the other half to come in so we can start purchasing, the materials to do this. But so we'll work on this, and then come this January, we'll be working on a proposal for 2027, and we'll probably be going to the Region 3 habitat coordinator and see what their thoughts are, and that's I would call that the southern half of the state. The guys out of El Dorado, so it'd be the lakes down in there, El Dorado, Cheney, all that string of lakes down there, in southern Kansas that he would cover. So, and find out, what they would want to do, and pick a lake, and hopefully, get another successful grant opportunity. So
And for those of you at home that aren't familiar, Clayton's really good at writing grant proposals.
Chat GPT is really good at writing grant proposals.
Okay,
I'm just
well,
getting better at prompting it. So
there you go. Okay, well, you're a great AI
yeah.
prompter.
Yep, it can do a lot of writing, a lot of writing and research that it would take you to do, and then obviously, guys, we have to have buy off from Fish and Game on all this, right? Like that's part of the grant applications is they want to know who you're coordinating with your state, wildlife and parks or state biologists to write these grants, and so it is a partnership between us and wildlife and parks. So, like I said, there's habitat coordinators. There's three of them across the state of Kansas. There's Region 1 is Mark Shaw. He's out of Webster. Like I said, Region 2 is Nick. He's out of Perry, and I forget the gentleman. They have a new person down in El Dorado. I'm going blank on his name, but that's who I'll probably be working with next year. And then we just rotate in a circle, right? So we go from Region 1 to Region 2 to Region 3, and then we'll go back to Region 1 and pick lakes in those regions that the habitat coordinators um, you want to do and what they want to accomplish.
And
So
along the same lines, last week you had posted the survey,
correct.
and I've got a link to it here in the comments for the guys. Maybe just explain a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I've been working with wildlife and parks, and I think the black bass regulations have been something that's been on their mind and talked about the last 3 or 4 years, and they had started working on some stuff, and then obviously we got a new secretary wildlife and parks a couple of years ago, and that kind of set everything back as they transitioned into their team and what they want to do. But so they're putting this survey out, and what the goal is right now the state length limit of 15 inches is probably the exception more than it is the rule across the state of Kansas. So there's less lakes covered by the state law than there is by all these local exemptions, and so they want to get to basically a statewide length limit, creel limit regulations that covers the majority of the lakes, and then you could have your little one-off exceptions from there. So what they're looking for is feedback, guys. Like there's I think it takes 5 to 8 minutes to fill the survey out, and they're going to use that to write their proposal, and then they will present that at a wildlife and parks commission meeting, and they'll present it, they'll put it on the books, they'll have public comment sessions, they'll have discussions, and they'll tweak it, and eventually that will become the new law. And, it's going to take it'll take 18 to 24 months, just the way our sessions work, and um like I said, if you've ever been to a Wildlife and Parks Commission, it's not like they can, it's not like the biology can, biologists can say, hey, we want to do this, and they have a few people comment, they discuss, and then they're like, okay, let's vote on it. It's a procedure, right? Like they've got to introduce it, they have to workshop it, they have to get public comments on it, then they have to have legal make sure it falls within all the state statutes, that it's written right. Then the commissioners will finally vote to approve or disapprove, whatever is written. Then it has to actually be filed into like the Kansas registry, and once it's finally published on the registry, does it actually become state regulations or law. So it's not just, hey, this is our suggestion, let's vote on it. There's quite a bit of process to actually make a rule and regulation change. But their goal with this is to make whatever this statewide regulation is going to be, especially on the length limit. They want that to cover the majority of the lakes, and not have all these individual one-offs all over the place. I think if you follow along at all, they just did that with the blue catfish regulations. A lot of lakes were like, this lake is only over 35, and this does a slot, and this does this, and so they moved to a more uniform regulation across the state, and then they can still set individual regulations if they need to protect a population or something like that. So it's good, but like I said, they definitely want the bass anglers, the bass, I'll call it the bass communities, input on this, right? They want us to give them input of what we feel and what we think, and so it's nice to see that they're actually reaching out to the bass community, because they,
Yeah,
they could just do this in the backside, right? They could just say, hey, this is what we're going to do, right? And then you'd show up at a commission meeting, they'd already presented something, and yes, you can voice your concern, to the commissioners, but it's already going to be moving forward. So this way at least we have a seat at the table, and we can actually voice our opinion. So I encourage everybody to, like I said, it only takes 5 to 8 minutes. Just go out there, fill that survey out. Let them know what you think. I mean, they're asking for opinions. I think they try to have Wildlife and Parks this year try to have public input sessions on. They had all the biologists show up from the lakes. I don't know they were well attended, unfortunately. But I think you're seeing a shift, and they're trying to be more out in the public, getting more public interest. Trying to be more transparent, at least from the fishery side of what they're doing and why they're doing it. And that's probably a good thing. I mean, I think everybody wants to know why stuff is being changed and why stuff's being proposed. So encourage everybody. I know not everybody can make everything, but it would really encourage everybody to do whatever you can. Even on the commission meetings, if there's something coming on, you don't have to physically attend them in person. They have a Zoom session. You can actually ask your questions across Zoom, and they'll answer you back and all of that. So, like I said, we have to probably voice our opinions more if we actually want to be we want to be heard, and we just can't sit in the background and have internal discussions and not actually get that stuff out there. So that's the only way we're going to make changes, and make changes hopefully positive to what we want to see or have some influence on. So,
I debated if I wanted to go on this subject or not, and I'm going to.
all
And
right.
you're probably going to kick me under the desk, but uh, where does the Corps stand with the spraying
Where? At
at
Wilson?
Wilson or any of our
Okay.
other?
Well, so I can tell you at Wilson, there is a proposal to spray the lake again. Um, it's, I think, roughly 50 shoreline miles, which is over half the lake, 450 acres. Um, there's a lot of stuff going on the backside. People have been calling, to the Corps, expressing their concerns. Um, you're more than welcome to do that. I would just ask, if you're going to do that, you have to be respectful You can have a conversation,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's not calling and bitching and yelling and all that. We all, it's a multi-use lake. I mean, we have just as much say as everybody else. Um, you've got two sides here, guys, right? You've got the fishermen, and we want as much stuff in the water as possible. And that you also have the recreation side, and they just want a bathtub, right? And so
True.
we have to meet somewhere in the middle, right? There's got to be some give, probably somewhere. So the other thing that really I can tell you that would probably make the biggest difference is you got to write your senator and congress people, right? If that's probably going to have a bigger influence on what's going on than just calling the Corps of Engineers, because I don't think they're going to change their mind. They see it as an invasive species. There's probably money in their district. They asked for it. They put a proposal out. I know Fish and Game has been. I know the biologists have been. They've had meetings. They've been in contact. I don't want to speak for them, but I know there's been some conversations and stuff going on the backside. So, but again, like I said, we can voice our opinions. I mean, you can Google the Corps of Engineers at Wilson if you want to know their number. You can give them a call. I would just ask that you do be respectful, because I know for a fact he's been called by some people and he's been yelled at, and that's not. We shouldn't be yelling at people. Like I said, we can
Right.
we can have respectful conversations about the stuff. I I'm hoping they'll work with Fish and Game. We can get some areas excluded. Obviously, you know, from my point of view, we're trying to establish all this aquatic vegetation, and I'd hate for them to go in and spray and kill it like they did last time. Last time they pretty much nuked everything. We had water willow we had reestablished in 8 or 9 pockets. They killed all of that. Anything that was visible above the water got killed, all the pondweed, everything, and then the banks just didn't really grow anything. The lake has come up about a foot and a half. There is frag in the water right now. It's not very deep. It's maybe a foot and a half at the most. It looks good. There's life all around it. Um, but again, this is Wildlife and Parks doesn't own Wilson, right? They don't. Wildlife and Parks doesn't technically own any lake, right? When you think about it, you have the Corps of Engineers that own all the dams, and then they kept part of the lakes, right? So Wilson, Milford, most of the lakes out in eastern Kansas, right? Melbourne, Perry, all those are Corps of Engineered lakes. We have a lot of Bureau of Land Management lakes in western Kansas, right? So that's your Cedar Bluff, your Webster, your Kerwin, your Glen Elder, your Norton, all of those. So those are the government entities that still truly actually own the reservoirs, right? Fish and Game can manage them. They got state parks on them, but they technically, they don't own. They own their state parks and they own their wildlife areas around them, but they don't actually own the shorelines and all of that stuff, right? So those government entities can still come in and have a say of what they want to do. But like I said, it's in the probably the best solution is the one that makes everybody upset, right? If the fishermen are upset and the pleasure boaters are upset, that means something probably had to be met in the middle, compromise wise. But um, last time it really felt like they were catering to one side. We didn't find out about it till obviously the day before it happened. I mean, there's not a lot you can do when they've already got the uh, the rotor fueled up and loaded full of spray. It's probably going to happen. This is probably going to happen too, guys. Like I'm realistic. We're probably not going. There's probably no way you're going to get this stopped. Now, is there areas that they probably need to treat? Yes, if it's a public access issue, right? You got a boat ramp choked out. You got
Mhm.
public swimming beaches choked out. You got that stuff. Absolutely, they have to manage that. Obviously, if it's a super invasive species, if this was giant salvia and all that they have down in Texas, you have to control that stuff, right? There's no way around that. Now, and the whole thing with the frag though is it gets all intermixed with a lot of the native stuff too, right? There's native Phragmites, right? That's not invasive. That's native to Kansas. There's cattails. There's all this stuff that's all mixed into this one, into that ecosystem, right? And unfortunately, to spray one, you kill everything. So, um, but like I said, I would encourage people, to voice your opinions. But the biggest thing you can probably do is actually, write your local senator and congressman and say, hey, we have to find ways that the Corps of Engineer works with the interested parties. And the interested parties, right, are wildlife and parks and the biologists, it's the fishermen, it's the boaters, it's the campers, it's everybody, right? We should be having public meetings on this stuff, right? Not just finding out, through somebody slipped up and told somebody, because the way the way they came, the way this was basically came about, the way we learned about it earlier is one of the way I was told is, one person talked to the other and then they talked and was like, hey, did you know this was happening? Type of thing. Because like I said, the last time we found out about it in Wildlife and Parks found out about it the day before it was gonna happen. So they're not the only lake. I know Glen Elder's been sprayed. I believe they're going to spray at Cedar. That's the Wildlife and Park land managers. Um, so they're doing a little bit different stuff, but and then I've had conversations with those guys. I'm not sure why all of a sudden the war on frag has happened, but they're all convinced it's an invasive species that needs to be eradicated, and unfortunately the fishing habitat's what's suffering from it, right? Is because all of it's growing along the shorelines, unfortunately. So it makes great fish habitat. I mean, it does use water, guys, right? Like if the river channel's completely choked off in it, I'm not saying that they probably shouldn't be spraying the river channel, but understand you could have miles and miles and miles of the river channel, and they don't actually own that, right? Like once you get past the flood zones and all of that, right? That becomes back into private land of the farmers and whoever owns the part of the land the river's running through. So um, the other thing I think I know from what I've talked to some of my buddies and stuff that know, we've asked why they can't use like a drone. I don't believe the chemical they're spraying can actually be um, put down via drone for application. It has to be either like a fixed wing aircraft or a rotor, a helicopter, where you can spray it, off a four wheeler or whatever. But the proposal at Wilson again is to use a rotor, to put it down. So um, I guess more to come on that. If I hear more, but it is probably going to happen again. And like I said, it really our impact, and on a lot of this stuff is really, unfortunately, it's all political stuff, right? Like it's got to go through our either state legislators or our federal legislators, and that's where we're going to see, changes made at, right? If a federal senator or congressman gets enough complaints, right, they're going to have to pay attention to that if their congregation's telling them something, right? And they'll look into it, right? And while maybe it doesn't stop it this time, maybe the next time it happens, there's more public insight and there's more public meetings and better compromises can be made. So that's kind of what I guess I know on that. I know it's a sore subject with everybody, but
And
it,
I'm going to let you off the hook
yeah,
because Clayton did not know that I was going to ask him that, and I totally felt in my heart that he would answer the way he did, and that's the correct response. You draw more flies with honey than vinegar, don't you?
yep. Yep. Like I said, and like I said, if you do want to call, like I said, they're there to answer questions. I mean, they're not gonna not talk to you, but I do know, we have to be, like I said, you got to be respectful. Um, don't call in just chewing ass up down one side down the other. That's not a good way. It's not a good look to be, like I said, you can have conversations, but they've got to be respectful. And like I said, and the more they hear from us, right? Like I said, it's sometimes the squeaky wheel gets the grease type of thing, right? If there's more, say, pleasure boaters or campers or whatever complaining it needs to be sprayed than fishermen complaining, right? They're gonna, they've got their ear or whatever. And I'm not saying that's what happened this time. I honestly don't know the backstory. We know what we were told last time. I don't even know why this was all brought up again and why they're going, back after it, other than I think there was some money in our district, and, they probably were like, hey, we can use it. We'll apply for it. And, they were granted the money. So they're going to spend it. It's already been allocated, and there's already there's proposals out there. I mean, like I said, the only good thing we can hope is that, the biologists that, wildlife and parks can work with them and get some exclusion zones, and maybe, can get some areas where we've put these Arkansas cubes and all that exempted from being, sprayed, or if there's a really big mix of, native ecosystem in there, maybe we can get some of that spared, unlike last time. So I think that's best case scenario. And like I said, moving forward, like I said, we definitely need to make sure we're contacting, our state Congress people and our national, federal Congress people, and letting them know that, maybe, they may not be aware of what's going on, right? They may just been told like there's an invasive something and it needs to be addressed, and, it could be literally that high level, right? So, maybe they need more of the picture, from the people, and like I said, from their, the people that, have elected them to be their representatives. Um, and a lot of stuff with the wildlife and parks, even in the state of Kansas, guys, like you'd be surprised how many times the lawyer guy goes like, we can't change that ourselves because that's a state, it's in state statute. So, um, I'm not sure why they do some of that stuff in state statute. Um, but they do. There's some other state statute stuff now that's really, impacting wildlife and parks. They passed, I don't know what you want to call it, but it's basically a law that says that if anything has an economic impact, I think of $250,000 either direction, right? There's got to be an economic study done, right, before they can change a law or do anything. And I don't think they intended that for wildlife and parks, but there's already been impacts where they've had bipartisan, both sides. I mean, that's a good thing about hunting and fishing, is there's really no party lines when it comes to hunting and fishing, right? Everybody, you got just as many people on one side as the other side that like hunting and fishing, right? So usually all the hunting and fishing stuff's pretty much down the middle. You're going to always have, bipartisan support of that. And they had a bill, pass both the House and the Senate, and it got vetoed because they didn't do a economic study, right? Because it was going to have an economic impact, on the state. And, while they may have passed that bill to curve other things, they thought it has unintended consequences. And the only way to get like Fish and Game and some of these organizations exempted is they'd have to go back and amend the law now to, so you're talking they have to reintroduce legislation to go amend the law, and it's got to go through the whole cycle again, to get, say, Fish and Game out from underneath of that, out of that law. So, sometimes they're a little smarter than they think they are, or they're doing stuff and then they don't realize that, maybe we should have done a little bit more into that. That's going to impact more than, what we thought. So, it's definitely interesting. You wouldn't think a lot of this stuff would be over there, but that's where a lot of this stuff, lies at. And again, I try to share all the stuff from Bassmaster that I think is pertinent. I think I shared an article, the stuff I think it's going on in Washington, right? They're going to have a ballot, and, if that resolution passes, there'll be no hunting and fishing in that state, right? The way that the law is written. So, I know a lot of us always think that stuff like that can't happen, out here. Some of the lead tackle stuff that they're talking in the up in the Northeast and all that. But guys, trust me, once if that stuff passes, it's always going to trickle down, right? Because you have the same type of either organization or groups that support all that in almost every state. And once they see it pass somewhere, right, and gain traction, that just gives them more momentum to, to try to get that passed nationwide. Or maybe they try to get a senator to introduce it in, at the United States, Congress level. So it's always a good eye to keep an eye on all that stuff, because at some point that may, it may impact us. I mean, I know public access is a real big problem out, in the East Coast. Townships and developers buying the land around and then getting the state to shut off public access to public bodies of water, right? And then basically that subdivision and now has a state funded, state maintained lake that now became a private lake because they've cut all public access off of it, right? So, kind of encourage everybody, the American Sports Fishing Society, all those are our national legs, right, to challenge and you know try to keep this stuff from happening, to make sure we maintain access to what we enjoy. So it's always good, and I'm always going to post, try to post that stuff just to keep everybody aware of what's going on. Even though it may not be here, because like I said, at some point it could be here sooner than you thought. So, um, and like I said, if anybody has any questions about any of the habitat stuff, I'd be more than happy to answer it. So,
Dude, thank you.
yep.
Hey, Brad.
Hey,
Welcome.
Clayton, I'm sorry I missed you.
It's all good.
I do not have a legitimate excuse. I looked up and I said, "Oh my gosh."
Oh, his wife's going to tell us the truth.
Yeah. Well, to keep it civil, I said, "Oh my gosh."
Uh-huh.
Those probably weren't the exact terms, but
So,
Well,
like I said, I would encourage everybody. Like I said, if especially if you know the biologists in your area, right, and there's something you guys want to do, please let me know. Like I said, the guy at Wilson, right, he called me, right, and that's what I'm trying to get these relationships opened with all these habitat coordinators, and the biologists around the state to say, hey, if you're looking to do a project, right, like I know, Shaw's going to go to Norton this year and still put cedar trees in, so maybe an email come out from me or a notification saying, hey, if you can make it to Norton on a Thursday afternoon and help them sink cedar trees, they're going to go up there and sink cedar trees. So I'm hoping to get maybe those habitat coordinators and more of those biologists, when they're trying to do projects locally, even if we can only get guys from that area to go help out, 3 or 4 on a weekday, that's still right. That's still good. It still shows that we want to be involved, that we're trying to do what we can and be good good partners in all of this. So
amazing job, dude.
yep,
Seriously.
I appreciate it.
I it's kind of inspiring because I'm sitting here, I'm listening to this, and I look at this picture, and some of these same guys volunteered for the first project at Wilson.
Yep.
That got sprayed. And they still came back and did it again. So if they can do that, then we can certainly, as an organization, show up and help with the project at Perry and build these.
Yep, and I will say those are some of the most tedious things to build, because every one of those joints has to be pipe doped. We had a couple different flavors. They had found some that was self etching and glue in one, so those went a lot faster. But if anybody have ever replaced PVC in your house, whatever, right? You've got to primer it, and then you've got to glue it, and then you've got to hold it, and those things got to be sealed tight, right? You don't want any water getting in them, or they're gonna sink. So, and then the chicken wire. I think there's like, I don't remember. There's like 100 zip ties on every one of them holding them chicken wires on. So that like there's a cage and then a bottom, and you've got to intertwine them all, and they're pretty tedious to put together. So I could say the more help we can get, the better. Because like I said, they spent a whole day just cutting PVC pipes. Each one of those has, whatever, there's one, two, four elbows, and then those bottom pieces, have or a full cube. So there's a lot of gluing before you can even start putting the chicken wire in there to support stuff. But they talk about it's crazy. You had to go with like a 1-inch hole chicken wire to keep the turtles from eating the grass. I guess the turtles are one of your biggest enemies. I didn't realize turtles ate so much vegetation, but the guys from Arkansas were saying how much, like if a turtle gets into one of those cages, within like 2 or 3 days, there'll be no grass left in it. They'll eat every bit of it out of the inside of that uh, cube. And those are 3 foot by 3 foot cubes is what those are. But like I said, they're all the ones in the clean water at Wilson. We were just out there this weekend. They all look good. All the grass in them looks good, and you can see fragment as it's all over, around them and blowing around the lake. And like I said, the goal is just to let it scatter and hopefully self-propagate itself. And hopefully, and like I said, these are long-term things, though. I mean, this is not, you're probably not going to have a colony established by the end of this year, right? Like a fishable colony. But the goal is in the next 2 or 3 years, hopefully you get 5 or 6 sites of this, right? And then once it can self-propagate itself, then you can move these cubes to another area. And but I can tell you at Wilson, they're pretty much in the back of every cove. You'll see them back there floating in 3 or 4 foot of of water, and if you go up next to them, you're going to see that they're completely full of coontail in the middle of them. And like I said, that's what we're going to try to get established. And if eventually they get them established, they can also use these if they want to grow pots too, right? They can set pots down inside of these and protect them and grow water willow or pondweed or whatever they wanted to do, inside of these things too. So they're kind of dual purpose. But we would recommend, you go out and listen to the guys from Arkansas, their podcast of, how the Corps of Engineers came up with this. And the success they've had. And a lot of their lakes have fluctuation like us, and they're a lot of them are structured like ours with the rock and the sand. And um, so hopefully we get them going, and hopefully this pilot will be successful. And then we can bring this to the masses. We built a lot of Georgia cubes, so hopefully if this works, then we can get these things going and get them in every reservoir, and hopefully get some grass going in them all. And like I said, everything we're doing is native to Kansas, and wouldn't be considered an invasive species. So
I just wanted to reiterate something, and it didn't. Okay, we all know that I'm a little off most of the time. Anyway, it it didn't occur to me right off the bat until you were just speaking about it. This is not like a Georgia cube where you sink it and it's gone.
No, so
they can
yeah.
actually pull it out and use it again.
Yeah, so there's one concrete. So it depends on depends on your biologist. Some of them just use concrete blocks. They just buy concrete blocks. Other ones, as Danny knows, like we do half of a 5-gallon bucket and use like some kind of wire handle, and you pour a 5-gallon bucket, you pour your concrete in, you stick a handle and you shake the bucket, you move the bucket, and you make these anchors. And they get 2 or 3 yards of concrete, and you shuffle these anchors in. So what you're not seeing here is they took a piece of steel cable, say, so we put them in 5 foot of water, so we made it say 15 feet long, right? So the lake comes up or down, and then they can float in a circle. But yeah, it's tethered to the bottom, and then this winter they'll go pull all these out of the lake, and they'll store them, and then next spring they'll be able to go put them all back out there and go again, and they can move them to different areas of the lake. And yes, these were never intended to be a permanent structure. They literally float and move with the wind and move with the waves, and they can go up and down. And like I said, if the lake, the lake was 5 feet, so like at Wilson, right? We put them in 5 foot of water, knowing the lake was 5.5 feet low. So we wanted to make the cables long enough that they could come clean up to full pull. Now, I mean, if the lake floods 10 foot high, they may have to go get them, right? Because if they've only got 10 foot of cable, I mean, they can only float so high. But yeah, the goal is they can move them like Hell Creek right now is just super muddy at Wilson. Like we had some rains that muddied the whole that whole Hell Creek area up, and the grass isn't growing good in the cubes. So they're gonna pull those and move them to an area that the grass is growing better, right? So they'll move those out, into the clear water a little bit where the grass looks like it's a lot, healthier and doing better. So, maybe they'll double up in some areas. And I don't know, like I said, Arkansas was putting like 8 or 9 of these in an area. So it really depends on how they want to do them and what the biologist wants to do. And Nick, the way we wrote the proposals, right, he's going to use it as a scientific study, right? We're going to build, I think it was like 35, I think is what we had planned to build or whatever. And then he needs some tanks, but he's going to put these in areas and he's going to study them. He's going to keep them, filled, and then they're going to study them and see how long it takes to get an established colony, or if they can get an established colony. And I think they're going to, you know, maybe they put 4 in an area, maybe they put 1 in this area, and then study to see, what the best ratio of these things is and what gives them the most success, on our reservoir. So I think he's got areas already picked out that he wants to, sink these in. But yeah, basically we built them. Travis took his seasonal out. They actually went out in the rain. It was pouring the next day, and they went out in the rain and sunk all those all over the lake. And then they came out the following week and filled them full of grass, and have been continuing to monitor them and filling them full of grass, as they need more in it. So it's a little more uh, work heavy on the biologist than the Georgia cubes, where you just sink them in the lake and then go back and shock them, or the trees, or the mossback stuff. But it is, like I said, they're trying. I mean, that's the only thing we can say, is at least they're looking at other states and looking at other ideas and trying to figure out how to get better habitat in our lakes. So at least there's some movement there. At least with some of the
Yeah.
biologists and some of the lakes. And a big thing, guys, is like, um some of these reservoirs, we're gonna have a hard time sinking anything other than cedar trees. The mossback stuff is all microplastics free, but there's a huge concern about microplastics in the water. And until studies get done proving that PVC pipe and these other things are not contributing, to the amount of microplastics in the water, right? They're going to err on the side of caution, right? They don't want to be the person that puts something in the lake that either contaminates it or the fish, or whatever. So while we may not think much of it, that doesn't mean that they're not going to err a little bit on the side of caution, because I mean, it's they're representing a public entity, and they're always going to be on the cautious side, right? Like you have to understand that they're going to be very risk adverse, right? They're not going to take too much risk, and then they can't with being a public entity like that. So I just ask you, how you guys have a little patience with them. But if you see a biologist out, like, talk to them, find out what they think. Tell them you're a bass fisherman. Tell them what you're observing, right? Like a lot of us, we're not biologists, but I believe we're good observers of wildlife, right? So let them know what you're seeing. If you're seeing a certain type of structure or habitat do well, please let them what's going on. That's my good night. So like I said, hopefully, like I said, hopefully we continue to get grants. And like I said, I definitely just need participation, guys. And, I do need more youth participation. I'm going to state it. Our youth participation has been pretty lacking at the last couple habitat things. I'm always going to, and I get people got sports and they got all sorts of activities. Been trying to schedule these, outside of major, sports and major activities. We'll try to work around. I try to, these guys don't work on Saturdays. I've been able to get the biologists to come in on Saturdays and do these habitat projects and stuff. So do understand, they're coming in on what should be their off day. Um, but a lot of these guys, a lot of these biologists, even your park managers and stuff, I would encourage you to talk to them. They're outdoorsmen too, guys. Like there's a reason they're a biologist. There's a reason they're a parks manager, whatever. It's probably because they're into the outdoors also, right? Like, most of these guys hunt, they fish, they're sportsmen just like the rest of us. So there's got to be some kind of calling, to make you want to pursue that as as your job and what you want to do. So, um, but like I said, always try to be respectful. That's I would ask of that. We always need to be respectful. Their opinions and ideas don't mean we have to agree with them. Doesn't mean they're going to agree with ours, but we should both be able to voice our opinions, have some disagreements, but we got to treat each other, all with respect. And the same thing in any kind of publications we do, guys, on Facebook and all that. I would just ask everybody be respectable of everybody's opinions. I've seen some pretty negative stuff when I've posted stuff like from wildlife and parks or whatever, and we can all disagree with stuff, guys, but we shouldn't be just completely negative. I'm just trying to put that out there so everybody. I'm trying to stay, I'm trying to have a good working relationship. They're passing along some of that stuff and being transparent, and I'm trying to share it with you. Um, some of those guys are KBN members, so I can tell you that while maybe their bosses are not reading it, they do see it. So we just ask that everybody just be respectful of everybody. Let's not turn comments into negative. And even around some of this habitat stuff, maybe it's not your lake, maybe you don't understand why we're doing whatever, but we should think of it as a positive that we got organizations and companies that are trying to invest in our fisheries. We got wildlife and parks trying to invest in our fisheries. And while that may not be what you want or your lake or whatever, hopefully we'll get around to your guys' lakes or whatever your favorite place is, and implement something you want. But until then, we still need to see these as positives because we weren't getting grants in the past. We weren't, there wasn't a lot of habitat stuff going on. So I do want to say, hey, this stuff is all positive. Like I said, it may not be exactly where you want it. They are growing bass still. They are still stocking. Maybe we're not getting the numbers we want stocked. Maybe we don't like the lakes they stock, but at least they are stocking. At least they are trying, to do the early spawners. At least, they are trying to go out and do stuff. Like I said, we don't always have to agree with what they do, but we still need to be respectful. And they're under they are, they are trying. I mean, they do only have, limited budgets. I mean, if you go out and read the Kansas State budget, um, you're going to see they don't hardly get any money out of the Kansas State budget. Their funds come from the excess tax dollars on hunting and fishing equipment and what they collect in fees. That's where they're getting their funding, right? It's not like the state of Kansas gives them a $10 million budget to go do whatever. Actually, they asked for some emergency dam repairs, and they actually got half of what they asked for. If you go read the budget for 2026, so yes.
Wow.
And so I mean, dams is like as far as like maybe it's the stuff they have at like their marshlands or wetlands or whatever. Some of the dams they own, maybe the state fishing lakes. But yes, they didn't even get all the money they asked for to do dam repairs from the state of Kansas. I think they got maybe 500,000 at the most when I looked at the budget. And it takes guys, they have this stuff hidden. Like it took me forever just to find the state budget and find what they had received for funding. But I will tell you, they don't like have a budget line item in the state of Kansas budget, right? They're self-funded pretty much. So, I sent some stuff out to support the excess tax stuff, right? To write your senators and congressmen. A lot of that stuff I'm sending out, guys. All you have to do is fill out your address and your name and click send. The letter's already written. It already knows who your senators, congressmen are off. Um, you'll get letters back from some of them. Some of them you won't. Um, but again, that stuff all helps, guys. The more we can contact those guys and let them know that we think this stuff's important to us, right? We definitely want to keep these programs going. Those are some of the most important conservation funds and programs that have ever been set up in history, right? The excess tax dollars on fishing and the excess tax dollars on your hunting products, right? So every fishing lure, every boat, everything you do in fishing, and same way on your hunting, all your guns, your ammunition, your hunting clothes, anything, right, has an excess tax dollar on it. They closed the loophole for all the stuff coming through from China and that through like Amazon that wasn't paying into the excess, tax. So, there should be more money going into those funds, but they basically, if you go look, that's what makes up the majority of the wildlife and parks funds is those excess tax dollars coming back that we're paying for when we buy our, hunting and fishing equipment. So it's definitely important. Without those, wouldn't fishing game wouldn't have much money to do anything. And if we all feel like they should have money out of the taxes we're paying, we need to let our state representatives know that too. They're like, hey, I don't agree with wildlife and parks not having a state line item in the state budget, right? So I've let my congressmen and senators know that, hey, they should have a line item in the state budget, and I'm more than willing. I feel my taxes should be going to pay for this stuff, right? Because I want better facilities at all our lakes, right? I mean, I'd like to see them buy more public land. There's a lot of stuff I'd like to see them do, but that all takes money. And if they're not getting money from our taxes, then, they're not going to be able to do a lot of that stuff. So, um, like I said, at the end of the day, a lot of this still comes back to politics and all of that to get a lot of this stuff done. But I do want to mention again, like since we're on here, really big shout out to the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame guys. You ever get to Springfield, Missouri, Bass Pro Shops, the Wonders of Wildlife Museum. It's a great natural history museum, probably one of the better ones I've been to in the country. You need to have your walking shoes on. It's a lot of walking. The aquarium, is awesome. And then they have the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame there. All sorts of stuff from all the different anglers that have been inducted into it. They have a banquet every fall. You can actually attend that banquet. It's public. You can buy tickets. You can go to the banquet. You can watch the members get inducted into the Hall of Fame. You can see all the anglers and all the legends that are going to be there. They also do a live auction, and then they do a kind of like an online auction too. You can win fishing trips. You can bid on fishing trips with professionals. You can buy bid jerseys, lures, all sorts of stuff, right? And then they take that money that they make from that auction, and that's what funds these grants, and then funds these scholarships that they give out also, right? So they take half the money and they turn half the money into scholarships for. Um, they're really looking for. There's a real need in this country for like biologists that are actually fishermen, not just what I'll call book biologists, right? Like actual outdoorsmen that want to go out that actually tournament fish, that actually do, and it doesn't have to be bass, right? It could be like, hey, I'm a catfish tournament guy or a walleye guy or crappie guy or whatever, but they want like working biologists that aren't just like, well, I learned this in a book and I'm going to apply knowledge that I only learned out of a book, right? That actually go out and what they call fishing. So anybody going to like a high school, basically that's going into a college fishing program, that's going to go into a biology degree, there's some special, um, basically scholarships for those students. So if we know any of those students, I would really highly encourage them to apply. There's also I can't remember her name. She used to be the bass conservationist, right? There's a scholarship for, female graduate students. So if a female graduate students in a biology program, for fisheries, there's a scholarship for there. And then the other organization that's supporting us guys is AFCO. Um, they make some great hunting and fishing clothes. But they have a pledge where they give 10% of all their profits back to conservation, and that's saltwater conservation and freshwater conservation. So, that's where the money they just re-upped with BASS, right? They're a huge supporter of conservation, with bass. So, if you're looking for any kind of, fishing clothes, fishing accessories, anything like that, you might check them out. They got sell pages all the time. Get on their mailing list. They have some really good sales around Black Friday, all of that. But those guys are huge, supporters, and that's where the money's coming for these grants. So we definitely need to support the organizations that are trying to invest in us and in our fisheries in the state of Kansas. So I'll be making more posts, tagging those guys. We'll be making acceptance videos. I don't know if everybody's seen, but when AFCO announced all their grants, we were the actual photo on the Bassmaster website. Was that photo of the state of Kansas where we're holding the AFCO banner and the KBN banner? We were actually on the front page this year for the grant announcements. So that's it's pretty good that we should have got some recognition out of that we were actually on the main website there with that picture. Was the one when they announced the actual grants. So I don't know what they did. I actually made an acceptance video for AFCO. I went out to the lake with Travis. We put the banner up. We talked about accepting the grant and about their AFCO giving back. And I'll be making one of those this year for AFCO and for the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame. And then guys, I send them all sorts of pictures and videos and all that stuff. And when I went to the Classic and we had the Conservation Summit, I went up and thanked those guys, and they all knew who I was, and they had all seen our pictures and knew all about our projects. And even the Mossback guy was interested. He's like, I want to know how our products are doing in your lakes and where we can improve. And so they definitely know what's going on, right? We give quarterly updates to those guys. So they know what projects have been announced, and they also know what the organizations are doing. So to think that you could walk up to a president of a company that size and he knows who you are and what you're doing is still shows we're a pretty small community, but it still shows that they're really, they're really invested in what they say they're invested in. So we really encourage you guys. Like I said, if you're looking for some unique fishing trips or fishing gear, maybe check out the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame auction this summer. And if you're looking for some good fishing gear, I have a lot of AFCO stuff, guys. Like I said, it's good quality stuff. I mean, like all of it, it's a little bit more pricey than what you're going to buy at Walmart, but it definitely lasts longer, and it's probably it's a lot higher quality. And like I said, they are investing back into conservation pretty heavily, in the United States. And so they, it's split between saltwater and freshwater, but that's where the grant money's coming from, guys. So we definitely would encourage people to check out those organizations.
Bradford,
Yes, sir.
aren't you glad that Clayton's on our side?
Oh my gosh. I can't. No, I cannot imagine being on the side opposite of Clayton. There's your knowledge base, your dedication, the lengths that you go to is it's just inspiring. And I can't thank you enough for what you do just for our sport in general, let alone our state organization. It's all it takes is just listening to something like this, and all of a sudden you go, my gosh.
Well, I appreciate it. Like I said, I have I have a daughter. My goal is to hopefully we still have lakes and stuff for her to fish and participate in, and hopefully make them a little bit better for the next generation. So
Yeah.
Like I said, if anybody else has any questions or anything, I'm here to answer. If not, you guys, obviously all my contact information's out there on our state websites. You shoot me an email, you can shoot me a text, anything like that. I'll try to answer you back. Facebook Messenger might be a little tough. I've got my Facebook pretty locked down, unfortunately. But other than that, you should be able to get hold of me email, or like I said, shoot me a text message, or if you want to have a conversation, like I said, I'll definitely answer. I might not be able to answer during the day, but I can definitely get back a hold of you. And like I said, my goal is to keep applying for these grants and maybe even start applying for some bigger ones. We're members of the Friends of Reservoirs. I'm getting all of our access set back up to that so I can start applying for some of their grants. They're small grants also. So hopefully more grant money to come and maybe more lakes. Maybe we can do more than one lake a year. If we can get more grant money, going. So I mean that would hopefully be the goal eventually, is to get a couple different proposals out, and try to get more conservation done. And like I said, guys, a lot of my conservation right now is focused around habitat, but it doesn't have to be all around habitat, right, guys? It can be around boat access. It could be, if you look, some of the states bought new gear for their weigh-in, right? There's Bass is partnered with a new company called Piranha. It's basically like an oxygen concentrator. You plug it in. You don't use an air compressor. You don't have to go get tanks of oxygen. You can buy this. You can plug it into your generator, and it basically creates pure O2 and puts it into your tanks, right? So there's a whole bunch of different things that we can do. Like I said, I'm mainly going on what Fish and Game wants to do. Right? Like I said, I'm contacting the habitat coordinators. We'll discuss a plan, and I pretty much tell them they just need to tell me what they want to do, and be as creative as possible, right? Because obviously, the more creative you are, probably the better chances you're going to have of getting successful grants. So. And like I said, I think these organizations, they like the variety and they want to see what's going on, and so I would definitely encourage everybody. And like I said, I encourage every club to go out and do your own local habitat stuff too. Like I said, I think if you'll find you can get a hold of your local biologist, you can maybe do more habitat work than you really think you can. I can tell you right now, if you said, hey, I want to go sink trees in Wilson and I'm going to, this is my club, I could get a hold of Travis and we could get a hold of the Corps and we could get stuff done. Right. And I think you could probably do that at a lot of lakes, as long as we're contacting the appropriate people and, running it through the proper channels. I think we could actually, do a lot more. The other thing is, maybe next year, if we can get some volunteers and stuff, Carl Jacobson has been doing this worldwide lake cleanup day. He had 130 some lakes this year in 5 or 6 different countries. And so, if that's something people would like to do, we did a lake cleanup at Cedar a couple years ago with the youth kids. We picked up, we walked like 3 miles of shoreline, probably picked up 200-300 pounds of trash. It's not a lot, but for that day, those beaches at least were clean. And so if that's something we would like to partner next year, maybe I'll put something out earlier and figure out when that's going to be, and maybe we can become part of that. Too, we can pick a lake and do that type of stuff. I'd also encourage people, keep your used fishing line, keep a trash can in the boat. Don't throw your fishing line overboard. Don't throw your soft plastics in the lake. Try to at least, recycle them or pitch them, in appropriate areas, not on the bottoms of the reservoirs. So, there's all sorts of little things we can do, to try to help out and make stuff as, pristine as possible. So,
Clayton.
Yeah.
John Stewart says you need to run for office.
No, there's no way that would ever happen. I have an anti-news policy in this household. I would lock down every news station if I could, or I would just get rid of them all. So I try to stay out of the news as much as possible. So there seems to be nothing good comes out of any of that. So I got a couple of rules at work. We don't talk about religion and we don't talk about politics. So anybody starts either one of those, I shut them down immediately, because that is not an appropriate place to talk about either one of those subjects, and nothing good will come out of any of those conversations. So
you got my vote. That sounds like he's running for office. What do you think, Brad?
Well, he's already an officer.
Oh yeah. Well,
we just have to escalate what office he's in.
I think I'm good right where I'm at. So.
Wow. Yes.
Well, you do a great job, and thanks so much for tonight.
Yep. Not a problem. Like I said, we hadn't had one of these, and like I said, I thought it was a good way. And then I'll be posting some stuff. I'll probably forward on the stuff about the grants, but we did just want to get on here and talk about them and explain what we're doing and maybe a little bit about the process of how we go around, applying for them. I know that maybe there's been some questions of why certain lakes and this and that, but like I said, do understand, guys. I've called multiple lakes and we've applied for multiple grants on different lakes, and sometimes we're successful and sometimes we're not. But I am trying to rotate them. We have lakes from western Kansas to eastern Kansas, and my goal is to hit all the major bass lakes, at some point. You know, Sometimes it's a little frustrating. We don't get, back from the biologists. Some of them, not all of them are balls of fire out there. So, but hopefully with the habitat coordinators, we can at least find a lake and work through them to try to get stuff done. Like I said, next year will be our what they're calling their region 3. So I will tell you guys, with the Wilson one, I don't know if many of you know Scott Waters used to be the biologist at Wilson, then he was the biologist at Glen Elder, and he's the region 1 supervisor now over all the biologists at region 1. And I can tell you he went to the biologist supervisors meeting and spoke very highly of our organization. So he was super impressed with our work we done at Wilson, and basically it's like, hey, you guys need to work with these guys. They know what they're doing. They do awesome work, and they should be an organization when they reach out that you should be taking advantage of the resources they're trying to offer. So I think we got a lot of good publicity and word out of that project there at Wilson. So because he actually came out and helped us sink the trees. We built all the habitat, and then when we actually sank the stuff in the lake, he actually came out and participated and helped sunk it all and got to see what we did. And I talked to him, and he had a bunch of questions about stuff like that. So I think we're getting, maybe we had disappeared in the state's eyes or whatever, but I think we've met with them enough now, and we've got enough local contacts and stuff. I think they're, at least we're back on their radar. And like I said, I think this survey, them asking a survey and reaching out to us directly is, indication of that too, right? Like, they know that we're here, that, we're the largest bass organization in the state of Kansas, and that, we have some opinions, and, we would like to, put our input into, around bass fishing and what we see going on and that. So I think we're getting some good relationships, built there. So, and obviously relationships all take time. So hopefully the longer we're in this, the more of those we can make, and get more of an impact done. So
Amen.
all right. Well, I don't really have anything else. So other than it's hot, hopefully everybody's fishing, and if you are doing weigh-in tournaments, just do proper fish care. And if you guys need fish care cards, let me know. I can get you the PDFs or the images, and I'll probably be handing some fish care cards out and fizzing cards at the state championship. We give them to all our youth anglers at the state championship, and I have enough to hand out to our adult anglers too. About proper live well care, and if you do go somewhere, I mean, we don't catch fish don't have to be all that deep to be fizzed. It just depends on what their air bladder is and kind of how fast they come up. So you can catch one in 10 foot of water that needs to be fizzed just as much as one in 30 foot of water. So it's good information to have. They're on laminated cards. You can put them in your boat somewhere and keep them, and or if you go to other states and fish deeper, clear reservoirs, at least you'll have the information there. So, but like I said, we should all be at least trying to do some proper fish care here, especially through these warmer months. I don't know what your guys' lakes are. Wilson's running, I think it was 86 degrees on Saturday in the back of the pockets, so it's definitely running warm on the water temp. So
I'm running warm on the water temp too.
yep. It's a little toasty out there.
Now, as moderator, Brad, would you like to would you like to retort?
I, I, don't- I blew my chance by missing this, so I'm just glad I got in on the tail end.
Oh, we have to keep it light with a super positive deal. I mean,
Absolutely.
the grant thing and my own naivete or stupidity or whatever you want to call it, not recognizing right off the bat that those Arkansas cubes would be reusable. So that's extra cool. It's not something that's just going to be built and sunk. It can be used again and again and again, and that's great. That's awesome. That's a super positive, I think.
Yep.
Clayton, thanks so much, man.
Yep, not a problem.
Thank you, Clayton.
Yep, and we'll probably see everybody at the fall meeting and at the state championship if you go and fish it. So
yeah,
sounds good to me. Hey, our 30-minute show has been 75 minutes tonight.
Yeah, I saw that. Well, it's because you wanted to wait for me.
We wanted to wait for Brad.
Yeah, okay. Lie.
No, we dedicated all the time that we needed to.
Time well spent.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's not
right,
like
guys.
you can out in the front yard and run around.
Maybe if you got the sprinkler on.
That could be a whole other thing, and I feel like Mike Turner might join in that.
All right.
No
Well,
comment.
like I said, I appreciate everybody's time that watched, and like I said, look forward to sending you guys more information and keeping everybody up to date. And I'm sure I'll hear back some results on this survey once it closes, and I'll share what I can share on that. So
Sounds great. Anything further, Brad?
No, sir.
Let's get out of here. It's hot.
all right.
Peace,
See you,
guys.
everybody.
Thanks
Yep.
so much. Next time.
Later.